Is this thing on? Hello, everyone. My name is Lewis Harris. I'm the creator of the Record in Progress podcast because I was very surprised at the outcomes of the 2024 election and felt I could have done more to see it going the way I wanted to see it go. And so I created this podcast to bring different perspectives, narratives, and stories together to create understanding and hopefully a pathway towards a better future for all of us. And so I'm lucky to have my next guest, who is someone I met through my partner, who is somebody I deeply respect now. And yeah, I'll have you introduce yourself.
Hey, Lois, I'm glad to be here today. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation. My name's Sarah, and I'm here to talk today.
Excellent. And how do you identify yourself?
That can be a bunch of different answers to that, but I think overall, I would say that I'm compassionate, I'm honest, and I'm trustworthy. And at the same time, I'm also pragmatic, very impatient, and intolerant of willful ignorance.
Okay, excellent. And just for the record, what state and city do you live in?
Oh, I live in Lacey, Washington.
Awesome. And what do you do, Sarah?
So I'm a freshwater habitat biologist and I work for a local tribe. I've worked in my capacity as a professional biologist for over 18 years. My role is to protect and restore salmon habitat to ensure the tribe's treaty resources are protected. And the lens in which I do this is not myopic. It's through a holistic and ecosystem recovery perspective. And it's definitely a long-term outlook. And by long-term, I mean, it's my job to ensure that the tribe's resources are protected for the next 7 generations. So I have to project out for over 200 years from now.
Wow. So you have a science background, which we technically have not had anybody who has one experience in like environmental conservation and tree rights, right? Because those are two very intersecting things, but also just the environmental aspect. And so I'm glad to have you on here because you're going to lend a perspective that not everybody gets to hear from. So the next question I have for you is, what is a credential that you use most often to sell yourself on job applications?
So it's been over 18 years since I think I've even tried to update my resume. So that's tough. So I think, to be honest, I don't really think there's one specific credential that would sell my skill set, but I do feel like I have a really unique perspective and an ability to effectively communicate scientific data and findings to a non-science audience, and that's including policy representatives. Part of my job is to be able to collect and analyze and data that we collect. And I have to relay that information to management, to directors, to our leadership, which is council, right? So they can make informed policy decisions.
Excellent. No, that's great. I'm like, I don't want to sum it up, but you can translate like complex things in a way that help people understand a little better.
Yes.
Okay. That's important. That's very important because as different people in power or otherwise come at a situation from their own experience and perspective, which may not be inclusive of the reality of a situation given the expertise needed to understand specific facets of an issue.
Yeah, I would think so. And I think it's really important that we're able to communicate the reality, right? What is the reality on the situation and how does that translate to decisions that are going to be made at a much higher level, right? And to bridge that together. And that's really important. And it's definitely a disconnect in a lot of places.
That's extremely important because there's in the national conversation, which I think is part of the manifestation of the outcome of the election, is a pushback or a non-prioritization. I don't know if conventional wisdom is the appropriate term, but really scientific know-how.
Yeah. And on the other side of that, what's really interesting for us science folks, is to be able to relay information to people that's palatable and that they can understand. If the science folks can't relay the information in a meaningful way, it's never going to translate to that policy level or even to the regular non-science folks. I mean, how many presentations have we seen being given by the science panel with the person up there with their graphs and their data, and it's just like this droning, reading a textbook on a page. That's not information that is easy for the general population to not just digest, but to listen to, right? So we have to find a way that people want to listen to that information.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that because one, a lot of people don't even have the opportunity, desire, or reason to be in front of a scientific panel where they have all those graphs, right? And so,
Right.
but that doesn't mean that information that's being conveyed is not important and can't be applied individually to those people who aren't in those spaces, right? And so I'm really glad you hit on that point of the scientific community needs to do messaging better so that the things that need to be communicated can be received by people who may not understand their role in it or may not.
Or have the patience to wade through all of the data, right?
Right?
People, we just want to know. So what does it mean?
So true. That's a great point. Thank you. You've already enlightened us so much with a perspective that not everybody gets an opportunity here. So thank you. So the first meaty question, if you will, is how did you vote in the 2024 presidential election?
I voted Democratic up and down the bill.
Okay. I've got to ask this because some of our guests are critical of, and I don't want to say critical as in you're bad for doing that, but some people think that voting straight down the ballot is or isn't a good thing. And I'm just curious why you personally voted that way. Because I did too. I'm gonna put that out there. I did too, but I don't know if people understand why people do that.
So first, I want to say that even though it came out that I voted Democratic down the entire ballot, I do take the time to see who's on that ballot. Most of my research comes in the primaries. I don't think it's responsible for me to only vote in one particular political party without understanding what these people are offering in the way of policy. I do my due diligence to make sure that if I am voting in a particular way, I don't want to just do it because they're Democratic and I'm a Democrat, right? Because there have been times that there's been someone on the ballot who was Republican, and I did vote for them as far as a particular seat. That was not the case this time around.
Okay, so you're hitting on the point that one, you do your research to understand who you're voting for and why you would vote for them to see if they align with your values.
Correct.
But you also said that because you do that level of research, you would not be there could be an election year where you do vote for somebody who's not a Democrat because they align with just your values, which it sounds like your values transcend the political party system or the two-party system.
I hope so. Yeah.
Let's validate that for people and yourself, right? Your values are more important and are more universal or are more than just the political parties that exist in the United States of America. So
Yes.
I think that's something that people should walk away from is that your values are not a party system value system. Your values are what matter to you from the perspective that you see the world and how you live.
Right.
And yeah, because I don't like the fact that the two-party system feels so confining that people aren't able to see outside of it. And I think that's part of the issue that we ran into this year was despite the moral failings or considerations about Trump, we were in a two-party situation that didn't give us any other options. And it's almost unfair to say that some people didn't vote for their morality when our system has just confined them to Democrat or Republican, regardless of the candidate's morals.
Yeah. And it's clear that a lot of us want more than a two-party system. It's unfortunate that I'd say over the last few presidential cycles, I don't know that we've had the opportunity to start entertaining the idea of a third, fourth party. It just seems like there's been so much more at stake that it's felt like even if we weren't extremely excited about the nominee, we knew that if we didn't vote for the Democratic nominee at the time, we were throwing our vote away. Right. And it sounds terrible to say that, but it felt like that because of how polarized this has been. We just need this country to get back on a moral highway that we can trust is representing all of our best interests so that we can have more. Does that make sense?
It does. And I often think about the last 10 years as an example of like significant social movement and systems change. Because to be honest, like a lot has happened in the last 10 years. And regardless of what side you were on in that change, there were people who felt like they were outside of the moral direction that was happening. And there were also people who were fighting those fights for equality and justice that were also on the opposite end of what that moral movement was trying to do. You know what I'm saying? You could be a Black Lives Matter protester and still be stealing money from grantors, right? Or you could be a racist and be giving your time and energy to the homeless. You know what I mean?
Right.
Regardless
Yeah.
of what they look like. And so we there's no kind of emphasis of the middle ground of people where, yeah, I don't know if I can articulate that correctly. You know what I'm
I
saying?
know I can't either. That's what I was trying, and it's really hard. But there was a time when the biggest difference between the parties was really about the economic structure and how the Democrats and the Republicans really viewed that sort of piece of the puzzle. And it's just become, it's so far outside of that now. And so that's what I mean. It feels like there was a time when I could say that some of the Republican people that were running for office, not just presidential, but for other offices, potentially aligned with maybe my outlook, my financial outlook, my thoughts about the economy and where it's going and how we can best succeed and progress forward. And it's gotten so far removed from that kind of
The flexibility or the
right
socially
that I
okay.
can't just vote for that anymore because it's not just about that anymore.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And the polarization, I think that's the dog whistle, or that's the hashtag that people understand that concept from. And you're right. We do need to figure out how to get back to that. The next question is, what are 3 feelings you have about the results of the 2024 presidential election?
Oh God, disappointed, disgusted, and terrified.
So you said terrified last. The next question is, what do you fear most about the next Trump presidency?
That is so hard to put my finger on just one thing.
Yeah.
But I can say one of my first thoughts I had was what this means for my job security, not only working in the environmental field, but for a tribe. The majority of our funding for the department staff and our projects comes through grant funding, whether this is pass-through money or through a competitive grant application process. Funding is still dependent on, quote, the powers that be to allocate the funding.
We're talking about federal funding and Congress specifically prioritizing issues where that money flows through.
Correct. We're super lucky to live in a very blue state. And in that regard, I'd say we're slightly insulated, but that doesn't mean that we're immune to decisions made at the federal level, like you're saying.
Right.
And in fact, since I do work for a tribe, we're very closely tied to the federal process and outcomes. So I definitely fear for my job security, but also at a much more significant scale than that, I really fear for our environment, all the species that live here, including us as humans. I think people often feel like being a good steward to our environment is a luxury and or secondary to everything else. And it's definitely not a priority for most people in the country. There's a huge disconnect here. The reality is that our planet is sick. If our planet is sick, we will be sick. This place isn't just our home, it's our umbilical cord to existence. So our health and our existence, it's tied to the health of this planet. So taking care of our environment should be a priority for everyone and anyone who wants to continue to not just survive, but thrive. And it should especially be a priority for anyone with children or grandchildren. What type of reality do we want to leave to our next generations? Because right now, our future reality, just through an environmental lens, is looking pretty grim.
That's great. And I'm glad you said that because the environment is one we're going through it right now. See said bomb cyclone or said hurricanes that went to states that they've never gone to in centuries types. You know what I mean? These things are happening and they are escalating. But even more so, there is fear that Trump is going to roll back some of the protections and prioritization of a healthy environment.
Yeah, he did last time.
So yeah, I hear you. I hear you there. So then I don't know if this is a fair question. What do you hope most about the next Trump president?
So what I hope comes of the next 4 years is a coalescence around a shared environment. I'm looking at these questions from that environmental lens.
Sure.
So that's what I hope, that there is a coalescence around a shared environment, a shared reality, and a shared future. There's been a lot of conversation about how we'll get through this together. And I would rather look at how we'll respond and be a better version of ourselves, because it's clear this country is not well. There's an underlying unrest, fear, and dissatisfaction with life in this country. And we all keep trying to just treat the symptoms instead of looking for the root cause so we can actually cure the disease or at least stop it from progressing. So I don't want us to just get through this. I want us to respond in a way that will start addressing these underlying issues so we can be better and we can do better.
What are the underlying issues that you're talking about here in America? Yeah, what is that underlying thing that people should recognize in the next 4 years?
Yeah, I want us to all understand the very fragile thread that binds us all, which is this planet. So when we all begin to realize that the air we breathe is shared and essential to life, that the oceans that surround our planet are what create our atmosphere and therefore essential to sustaining life, that the salmon in the streams are what not only feed our families, but what gives us this amazing and shared ecosystem in the Pacific Northwest. And the very basic fact that we can't survive as a species without caring for our planet in a shared effort. I think we'll finally start to be able to start curing the rampant disease of fear and unrest and a delusion that we're different, right? This big quote unquote different. When the thing that binds you is the very thing that allows your existence, the conversation changes, the perspective changes. And we need a paradigm shift in the way we view the world around us and the way we view ourselves in relation to that object.
That's exactly what I wanted to get to. So that's, yes, I'm glad that you hit on that point because like you mentioned, I take, for instance, I'm a big sci-fi fan. So in some sci-fi shows about the presence of aliens or whatever, and I'm not going on that tangent, I'm saying that when something outside of our current understanding becomes known, that changes the way we perceive the world, and it incorporates something that wasn't a part of our standard of understanding, right? And
Right.
so what you're saying is that we want to make it would be great if we could identify that thing as monumental enough to shift how we not only treat ourselves and each other, but also our environment, because our environment is one of the great things that allows us to exist on top of what we have to do to have a roof over our head and pay for our standard of living or find happiness in this world, right?
Yeah. Oh, exactly. And this planet, like our Earth, it's the one thing that I can point to say that it's not divisive. Now, I'm not saying our reactions to it, our responses to it, and how we care for it, those can be decisive. But if you just look at this Earth for what it is, how is that divisive? Who doesn't want to live here? Who doesn't want to be a part of this planet and to have that for their children, right? You can't be against our planet.
And at that same point, like you're also saying that people are taking our ability to actually live on the planet for granted.
Oh, yeah.
So that's interesting.
And I'm saying right now, we need to stop doing that. We can't take this for granted. We think that a lot of these resources we have are infinite. They're very finite.